Hi there, my name is Jenna Pacelli and I'm so excited to be with you today on World Mental Health Day. We are going to be talking about honoring the body's wisdom, somatic healing for depression, anxiety, and trauma. And we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to dive right in. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, wilderness therapist, private practice owner, and wellness entrepreneur. And I am so passionate about helping others find freedom from stress and trauma and heal trauma once and for all without spending years talking about it. So here is a riddle for you. The riddle is a Vietnam vet robbed a convenience store 2 years in a row on the same day. When they asked him why he did it, he said he didn't know. Okay, so think about that, chew on that. We'll return to that. We'll come back to that at the end. So stay tuned and I'm going to tell you the answer at the end, okay? So first of all, we want to understand what the word somatic means, right? Soma or somatic comes from the word soma, which means body. Somatic psychotherapy, when somebody's a therapist and is trained somatically, they are utilizing the body's wisdom or the sensations and the different responses that the body and the nervous system have in order to redirect someone's habituated response patterns. So they're the habits that people are in, we can redirect those in very powerful ways, utilizing a somatic body-oriented approach. And then the other definition we need to cover is the modern definition of trauma. So the modern definition of trauma is anything that the body or the mind has trouble processing. It's too overwhelming to process and then gets stuck in our memories and in our bodies, that the trauma lives not only in the memory, but it lives actually in the body, more so than the memory. So, or the story, I should say. So trauma lives in the body and not in the story. So we've got the idea that trauma, again, as well, is subjective. It's up to the person and how their system responded to it, as well as this idea that it lives in the body and the trauma responses live in the body and not in the mind. So I'm going to talk about this as well, especially because I tend to work with clients who have been through years of talk therapy or a significant amount of talk therapy, and they need something different. They're not feeling better. It's the same old, same patterns over and over and again. And they're usually at the end of their rope. So especially with my wilderness clients, I'm working with at-risk adolescents and young adults in acute psychological crises and their families, and helping them work through not only healing the child, but healing the whole family system. And this is often after years and years of talk therapy. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that. And then what the next piece I want you to understand is this idea of the window of tolerance. So if you imagine, like I've got my my phone here, okay, and it's two parallel lines. If you just imagine two parallel lines on top of one another, and this is the range that the nervous system has before the person is going to be overwhelmed. Okay, so we all know fight, flight, and freeze. We've got fight and flight up here. Okay, so this is like the gas pedal. This is on. Okay, go forward, on, do something. Okay, that's above our top line. Below the bottom line, underneath here, is the rest and digest side of the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, as well as the freeze response. Okay, so we've got fight, flight, and freeze. This is activation. This is movement. This is on, gas pedal. Down here, we've got freeze response, brake pedal. Okay, off. System turns off, right? So if you can remember on, fight and flight, and off, freeze, We're going to be good. Okay. So we have this window of tolerance, and everybody has a different range. So everyone has a different way and their own ability to work through stressors to a varying degree. So, we might go through our daily life, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, normal. Maybe some stressors, but I'm not so stressed that I'm going straight into fight or flight. I'm not so overwhelmed that I go straight into freeze, but I'm just normal or just within my range of normal. And then something happens and I'm, fight and flight. Okay. I'm going to show you a video here in a second of a polar bear that's going to help you understand this, where if I go up into the on, I go on, fight and flight. And if those responses either don't get me out of the situation or I can't complete them, the body cannot complete them, then I'm going to go into freeze. Okay. So if you imagine if somebody, let's say you're a little kid and you're wrestling with your sibling and they pin you down and you want to get away because you're mad at them. So you try to run away first, and then you can't. So then you're wrestling with them, and then eventually you just give up if they're bigger than you. Okay, so this is an idea of how that fight, flight, and freeze response is going to happen in sequence. Okay, so let's go. Okay, and then the other piece here that I want to share with you is the idea of big T trauma versus little t trauma. So big T trauma is what we traditionally think. That was our old definition of trauma. This is still traumatic. These are still traumatic experiences, but it's not the only kind of trauma that we understand now. So big T trauma, common, obvious causes of trauma: war, natural disaster, assault, witnessing trauma, things like that. What people aren't as aware of and what's more common are these little t traumas. So the less obvious cases, things like minor car accidents, falls, minor injuries, medical or dental procedures, okay, being left alone, waiting to be picked up from school, a parent who is emotionally unavailable, a parent that's overly enmeshed, overly in your space, moving a lot, financial difficulties, changing schools, the birth of a sibling, right? We can go on and on. There's a lot of ways in which life can just be stressful. Life can be challenging and it's tough. And so that being said, we want to understand that we could all be walking around with trauma symptoms or stress symptoms, and that can look like anxiety, can look like depression. Okay, so some signs and symptoms here of stuck stress and trauma responses could look like tension in certain parts of the body, digestive issues, other physical symptoms like irritable bowel syndrome, anxiety, panic. So if we can think about it as in terms of like on symptoms, it can look, so things like anxiety, panic, hyperactivity, ADHD would fall under that, exaggerated startle response. So like being really jumpy, can't sleep, right? Because you're on, can't relax because you're on, hypervigilant, looking around, kind of like where I need to always know where people are. I need to always know where the door is. Digestive issues, emotional flooding. So what that means is where you're so emotional, you have such big emotions that you struggle to manage them, or you even might forget what you were even talking about. I know I've been in situations like that where I was so overwhelmed, maybe in an argument I remember an argument with a partner years and years ago that I couldn't even remember what we were talking about anymore. And that's a sign, right, that we need to take a time out and we need to come back and regulate. Okay. Or other symptoms, right? So if the system is stuck on off, depression, anxiety, flat affects. So somebody is just like flat, right? No expression, expressionless. Lethargy, low motivation, feeling cut off from your feelings, not even being aware of your feelings or sensations in your body. That's a big telltale sign. disorientation, feeling disconnected from your body, feeling foggy, feeling fuzzy, feeling like you're in kind of a dream. These are all, could all be signs and symptoms of being stuck on off. Okay. And then also chronic pain can fall in here, low blood pressure, poor digestion. Okay. So let's head over here. Okay. I'm going to watch a little video. That word is running. So see him running, he's orienting, which means he's looking back, trying to understand where the danger is coming from, when he perceives his danger. He's biting at the air, you can't see it very well, and then tranquilize him.
Now he went and turned on me just as I shot, and I got him just back of the front shoulder. I got him in the ribs instead. But a big male like that should be okay. It's a good thermoregulating area. Hey!
Need to be sure he's really frozen.
Get an animal like that, he's just still blinking there. On oh, that's all right.
So you can see he's
perfect.
awake.
He's absolutely perfect. See the size of getting a bit bigger neck and so on, yes. Holy snapper. He's about as big framed as you'll probably get. If you watch that animal after he finishes convulsing, you'll see, because he's aware of the fact that we're all around him, and it's a very stressful experience for an animal like a polar bear. And after he settles down, and then he'll start doing a couple of deep breaths, and then he'll breathe really nicely, and it'll really, look, here he goes.
The system's regulating.
See how he's breathing there now? You can see, so that even though it looks a little unpleasant to look at him convulsing like that, in fact, it lets off all that stress, and he then is able to relax and sleep the thing off.
Okay, so that was a beautiful example of how a mammalian nervous system works through trauma. So the difference, what is the difference between the polar bear and us, right? This is the question. This is the critical question, because the difference here is the polar bear doesn't have a lot of the inhibitory frontal lobe activity going on, where it says don't shake, don't tremble, don't quiver, don't freak out during it just allows itself to discharge the energy. Whereas with human beings, we tend to clamp down on some of the responses that are natural and pretty primal and pretty primitive, and can feel scary if we don't know what to do with it, right? But it's our system telling us what we need as mammals. And it's our system telling us how to heal itself, right? How to heal ourselves. So Or so that's one part of it, is that we tend to be like, oh, I shouldn't do that. Like, after like coming out of surgery, people tend to have big moments of shaking and trembling, and that's actually really healthy. We want the nervous system to re-regulate after a traumatic experience like surgery, right? Because the body doesn't know. It just knows I'm being cut into. It doesn't know I need this for my health, right? The body doesn't know that. And so the other piece here is that the nervous system is always taking in 11 million bits of information per second, okay? Whereas the conscious mind takes in 60 bits of information per second. So conscious mind is 60, 60, 60. Body and nervous system, 11 million per second, okay? In between the two, why is all this information not getting into the conscious mind? One, it would be way too overwhelming. Two, we have a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, or the RAS, that filters information from the body into the conscious mind. It's going to filter things based on what we focus on and based on a whole bunch of other things, okay? So the moral of that, like what that means for us at 11 million versus 60, is that when people have been in talk therapy for years and years, or maybe not that long, but they're not making that much progress. And by the way, I'm trained as a talk therapist. I believe in talk therapy. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but for some people, and for a lot of us, if we're walking around with habits and patterns and things that we wish we could shift, and we just have a really hard time shifting and we don't know why, right? We want to look at what's happening in the body. Okay. We don't want to ignore what's happening there, because there's so much information coming in. And if you're stuck in any sort of behavior response, there absolutely could be a connection to the body, especially if you try to will your way through it, if you try to talk your way through it, and it's just like, or you could have all the awareness about it in the world, and it doesn't mean you're shifting the behavior. Okay. So, that's really important to understand the difference between the body taking in all this information and the conscious mind taking in all this information. So in somatic psychotherapy with a licensed therapist, they can support you in connecting the body to the mind, to the emotions. Okay. It's all interconnected. And what we also understand in the somatic world is that the emotions are the deepest layer of our experience, in terms of our physiology. So we have thoughts, feelings, sensation. Most talk therapies are just focusing on thoughts and feelings. Okay. So when we add in the sensation, the bodily responses, the imagery, it's a very rich experience. We really can make the therapy experience a lot more well-rounded. Okay. So the answer, okay, let's see, hang on, tune in one more second. So I'm going to give you the answer to the riddle here in a moment. I would love to connect with you. So this is my website. It's jennapacelli.com. You can see my first name and last name there. .com, pretty easy. And I've got all sorts of freebies there for you that you can download. So things like the self-care for driven people. I've got Yoga Nidra, which is a ancient healing meditation that is research backed now, and it's being used in VA hospitals around the country because it is an evidence-based practice for trauma resolution. So if you don't know where to start, go grab that guide, and I would love to guide you through Yoga Nidra. I have over a decade of mindfulness and yoga teaching and practicing experience. So that's another piece that you can come to expect from me, is I'm always going to have some level of mindfulness and movement in there for you. So there's Yoga Nidra on my website. There's the self-care for driven people. I've got a Mindful Mornings manifesto. I've got an essential oil blends guide for emotional well-being. So if you want to, you name it, I probably have it, as well as a lot of other resources. You can also, on my website, connect with me you can schedule a 15-minute free exploration call if you are interested in psychotherapy with me. I'm licensed, and then I can practice somatic experiencing with people all over the world. Okay, somatic experiencing is the somatic practice that I have been taught. Okay, so we'd love to connect with you there. And then I'm over on Instagram, of course, at Jenna Pacelli and at Jenna Pacelli Therapy. Okay. So to wrap it up, what is the answer? Maybe you're aware, maybe after all of this, you're aware of what the answer is to that riddle, right? So the Vietnam vet robs a convenience store 2 years in a row on the same day and doesn't remember why he did it. He doesn't understand. And when asked, can't remember. Okay, so what's the answer? The answer is that his platoon was killed. A bunch of men in his platoon were killed a number of years before on that day. Okay, so his trauma was living in his body and playing itself out in maladaptive behaviors. Okay, so we all have some version of this. We all have our own story of this, where the body is remembering, the body doesn't forget, and as Bessel van der Kolk would say, the body keeps the score. So I hope that's helpful. Would love to connect with you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.